Hello, this is Kevin with Jefferson Real Estate, and here is your weekly Park County real estate update. Let's start with interest rates. Mortgage rates are currently around 6.3% for primary home buyers. That is still high enough to keep buyers payment conscious, but we are also seeing some changes in financing that may help certain buyers qualify. One important shift is that some lenders are now considering a buyer's rent payment history as part of the qualification process. In simple terms, if a buyer has been consistently paying a rent on time, that history may help strengthen their loan file. This is not rental income. We're not talking about income from renting out a property. We are talking about the buyer's own history of making rent payments, showing the lender they've already been handling a housing payment consistently. That can make a difference, especially for buyers who may have solid payment history but tighter with debt-to-income ratios or less traditional credit profiles. It does not replace standard qualification guidelines, but it can help some buyers move forward who might have been on the edge before. For sellers, that matters. It can slightly expand the pool of qualified buyers, particularly for entry-level homes, cabins, and buyers transitioning out of renting. Now let's move into new listings. As we move through the spring market, we're continuing to see new inventory come online, and that's typical for this time of year in Park County. More inventory means more options for buyers and more competition for sellers. Early positioning, pricing, and presentation matter more as inventory builds. Now let's look at pending activity. We are still seeing buyers move forward when properties are priced correctly and clearly stand out. One current pending property is 1,300 Warrior Circle in Como, located in Indian Mountain, listed at $38,900. That property went pending after 18 days on market. That's a good example of how properly positioned land is still attracting attention and moving, even in a more selective market. Now let's move into recently closed sales. We've had strong activity across multiple areas of Park County. On April 24th, 522 Teepee Trail in Como and Indian Mountain sold for $36,000. Also on April 24th, 646 Antelope Way in Como and Buffalo sold for $30,000. Another April 24th closing was 420 Shetland Circle in Como and Indian Mountain. That home sold for $682,000 with 3 bedrooms on just over 4 acres. Also on April 24th, 4253 Cahokia Road in Hartselle in the states of Colorado sold for $9,900. On April 23rd, 303 Glacier Peak View in Jefferson and Michigan Hill sold for $160,000. Also on April 23rd, 5113 Campfire Road in Hartselle and Western Union Ranch sold for $150,000. On April 21st, 805 Longbow Drive in Como in Indian Mountain sold for $25,000. Also on April 21st, 1310 McDowell Drive in Como and Buffalo sold for $26,500. On April 17th, 1135 Swigler Road in Jefferson in Indian Mountain sold for $185,000. On April 10th, 62 Grand Lane in Hartselle in South Park Ranches sold for $47,500. On April 9th, 2163 Hardwood Loop in Hartselle in Petrified Forest sold for $470,000. On April 7th, 6452 Remington Road in Como in Elkhorn Ranches sold for $28,000. Also on April the 7th, 528 Glacier Peak View in Jefferson in Michigan Hill sold for $155,000. On April the 6th, 133 Joyce Lane in Hartselle in South Park Ranches sold for $115,000. And on April 3rd, 60 Idaho Court in Jefferson in Indian Mountain sold for $604,800. This is a strong mix of land, cabins, and residential properties across multiple subdivisions. We're seeing activity in Indian Mountain, Buffalo, Michigan Hill, Western Union Ranch, South Park Ranches, Elkhorn Ranches, Estates of Colorado, Petrified Forest, and more. Now here's the interpretation. The market is active, but more competitive. Rates are still shaping buyer behavior. Inventory is increasing as we move into spring, and buyers are taking more time and comparing more options, but they are still moving forward when a property stands out in value and positioning. The takeaway this week is simple. Rates are steady but influential, financing is evolving, inventory is rising, and buyers are still active, just more selective. For sellers, pricing and presentation matter from day one. For buyers, this market offers more opportunity, but the best properties still move when priced correctly. If you'd like a breakdown of your property, your subdivision, or your price range, I'm always happy to walk through the numbers with you. No automated estimates, just real local insight. This is Kevin with Jefferson Real Estate. We'll continue updating you each week with what's actually happening across Park County. Talk to you next week.